You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
And her daughter, in real life, played her daughter in the film. And I said, the question was, what was it like to work with your own daughter? And what the fuck is she going to say? It sucks. She's like, it was great. And what did you think when you first did your first scene with her? And she was like trapped. She's trying to put on a smile, and so it's deadly for these actors, directors, writers, fill in the blank, to be cornered with these such trite questions.
Hey everyone, thanks for hitting that play button. This is episode 94 of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before I get into the episode with Andrew Bloomenthal, really quickly I want to mention that Sundance and Slamdance are happening right now. So if you were at either one of these film festivals, please reach out to me. It's dave@davebullis.com is my email address. I want to hear, what your thoughts of the festivals, whether you were a panelist or you were just going to see a premiere, or if you just happened to drive by the entire film festival, and either one, Slamdance or Sundance, and just hear what you thought. We've actually had a couple guests are actually at Slamdance and Sundance right now as the recording of this intro. Each of them are telling me some interesting tidbits, and I want to get them back on. Jason Brubaker from filmmakingstuff.com. He's actually out at Slamdance with his company Distributor. He actually works with them. And Richard R.B. Botto and John Mazalowski are actually at Sundance doing a couple of different things. But I'm very interested to hear what everybody else is thinking about these film festivals, whether they got worse or better, and I'm interested. And there was an article also on nofilmschool.com about whether this is the best time or not to be a filmmaker. If it is the best time, it's very accessible, anyone can do it, which actually turns into a con because now the entire marketplace is going to be crowded. So really, I want to hear, again, I'm going to link to the show notes, but I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Is this the best time? Is it the worst time? If you listen to this podcast, you know exactly where I'm coming from. So other than that, let's get to episode 94 with film journalist Andrew Bloomenthal.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. It's another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Joining me today is Andrew Bloomenthal. Andrew is an entertainment writer whose work has appeared in Scriptmag, Creative Scriptwriting Magazine, CNBC.com, and Variety Magazine. Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I'm a big fan.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you for saying so. Andrew, just to get started, a question I always ask everybody is, how did you get started as an entertainment writer?
I've always been a journalist, primarily in finance, and it's always been great, and I've always paid the bills. But I've always had a more passionate love for film and filmmaking. I'm a screenwriter myself. I made a film, independent feature, a few years back. And so I've always been a fan of the art form of films and screenwriting, and I revere screenwriters and I revere actors. And I had this friend, we all have a nagging friend who tells us what to do, and we protest even though they're probably right. And she actually suggested, Andrew, you have the skills. Why don't you, put your journalism abilities to interviewing screenwriters? And I just kept protesting and saying, no, I have no interest whatsoever in talking to filmmakers because I want to be the subject. I want people to interview me. It was kind of a jealousy thing. But she was absolutely right. So one day I did a Craigslist search for entertainment writers, and lo and behold, Creative Screenwriting Magazine was looking for journalists. Now, I did have one clip in the realm of finance because I interviewed Oliver Stone when Wall Street Part 2, Money Never Sleeps, came out. I don't know if you saw that or if any of your listeners saw that. It was with Sheila LaBeouf and Susan Sarandon and Michael Douglas, sequel to his monster hit. So I interviewed him for the finance magazine that I wrote for because, the protagonist was a greedy hedge fund manager, and so there was some kind of a tie into that world. And so I have that writing clip, and I also did an interview with Michael Moore when he did a movie, and you're going to have to forgive me because I forget the title, but it was all about Wall Street corruption. So that was another tie-in to finance. And so I interviewed him for the Finder Film magazine I worked for as well. So I had those two clips like in my back pocket, and that was good enough to get the job writing for creative screenwriting. And it just, my friend, I'll say a big shout out to her, who she'll be listening to this. Hey, Leslie, I finally took your advice and it changed my life. It turned out to be a blessing because it really is a chance to commiserate with like people, screenwriters who, you know, only writers understand what writers go through and the trials and tribulations and the ups and downs and the victories. So that's how I got into it. And it's been bliss. You know, I live in Los Angeles now, and I get to go to all sorts of screenings and press events and have sit-downs, one-on-ones with well-known writers and directors. And so it just kind of happened organically. And next up for me, I'm going to be interviewing Don Cheadle, who is the writer and director for a Miles Davis biopic called Miles Ahead that he's writing and directing and starring in as Miles Davis. So it's been a great ride.
That sounds amazing that you get to interview all these, you know, awesome people. You know, I was looking at some of the people that you've interviewed. The way we met was even when you just interviewed the screenwriter for The Revenant. You know, I was just reading it that in Scriptmag, and I'll link to that interview in the show notes to everyone who's listening. But it's just, you know, like you said, you know, you understand, you know, what writers are going through, how they sort of have to build this. And I think that's even more interesting because the writer for The Revenant, and I'm very sorry I forget his name right now, but that's right, Mark L. Smith. Because he had to adapt the work from the book, and the person who wrote the book actually works for Obama and the United States, I think, Treasury Department, so he can't even promote the movie or anything. So I'm sure that, you know, that whole process of creating that was probably pretty interesting because I don't even know if he's even allowed to contact the original author to ask him, and if he just went in blind and just sort of, you know, made it his own without any input from the original writer. But again, you know, you've interviewed so many awesome people. And, you know, one of the questions I always, you know, I wanted to ask you, Andrew, is, you know, with Scriptmag, and any of these other magazines too, you know, when you actually see those job listings, like we're looking for new writers, you know, is there any tips you ever have for anybody that's, you know, submitting to those postings?
Yeah, I definitely like there to be a certain level of transparency. There's no way that an entertainment journalist is going to make a lot of money. That's not why we do what we do. So it's always important for you to find out, you know, what they're paying per article, so there's no surprises. And so you and the publication are kind of, you know, seeing eye to eye, and you have, you know, an equal expectation of what the terms are. So I would say make sure that there's an easy communication between you and the editor. Other than that, I think it's about like a slow build to get your I guess writing portfolio to escalate to higher and bigger films by starting out with whatever small assignments are offered to you and just say yes to everything. That's how I began with creative screenwriting. I was assigned certain stories, and I just ran with them, and I treated each one as if it was like a huge studio blockbuster, because the internet is forever. So you got to put your best foot forward ever, and in every single case, because that's going to be, every story is going to serve as a calling card. So treat every story like it's of equal import. That's one thing I would say. In terms of doing excellent interviews, I think the important thing to do is overlook the blunt and obvious cliched questions like, you know, what gave you the idea for the film? And what was your experience writing? like things like that are just like obvious, housekeeping questions, I call them. They're okay to ask, but I think the riches are in the niches, I've heard someone say, so I'm going to claim credit for that saying. And by that I mean get granular and ask real specific questions, because that will wake somebody up. I'll give you an example. When I was interviewing Ray Fiennes for The Invisible Woman, which was a really lovely little biopic where he was playing Charles Dickens, and it was about his affair with an actress who was like 30 years his junior, and this was like not done in polite Victorian society, so he had to keep her in the shadows, hence she was the Invisible Woman. So, not to throw other journalists under the bus, but during press day, we were doing this roundtable, and people were just asking him questions, in his capacity as the director. And they were saying, so, you played Charles Dickens, so what's harder, to act or to direct yourself? Like, he's going to get asked that a million times. Or, how did you do research on someone who's dead? Like, someone actually asked that question, and I just want to roll my eyes. I just felt so terrible for Ray Fiennes, because he was like, am I really here having to, entertain these blunt questions? So I sort of like interrupted, and I asked a very specific question about a very specific scene, about this moment where his girlfriend, this young woman, and her family, she had like several sisters and her mother, they were a band of traveling actors, and they were unpacking into their house after doing a touring show, and they broke out into this lovely song. It was just almost like this kind of lullaby that they were singing as they were unpacking their clothes from their luggage. And the way it was cut together, it was just beautiful, but they were singing live, and as opposed to singing to a pre-recorded track. So I asked him about that scene. I said, how did you cut that together? Did you get the sound mixer on board with you when you shot it? Like a real technical question. And he instantly perked up. He's like, oh my God, someone's asking a question I haven't been asked before. And just as I was leaving that day, the PR person who coordinates these interviews, she grabbed me and says, Ray Fiennes wants you to do a one-on-one. So, which is, when it's just you and him. So people, a screenwriter or director, they'll notice if you take the time to really watch the film and really come up with very specific and very detailed questions. Because when you're making a film, when you're writing a film, every bit of dialogue, the names you choose, every word choice is very deliberate and purposeful, and there's a story behind it. So that's my best advice when you're interviewing someone, is come up with real specific, granular questions. Say, I noticed she had a bizarre hairstyle, or I noticed there was this dialogue was very one-sided, where it felt like one person was talking more than the other. What were you trying to get at in crafting a scene that way? And they will respect you, and they will give you interesting things, as opposed to very blunt, phoned-in responses, which happens if you start getting the same questions asked over and over and over again, because that's what happens when they do these press junkets, is they're getting these same questions over and over and over again, and they tune out. So if you can come up with something original, yucky.
That's something I've seen too, Andrew, is when the person is, you can see a lot of these actors at the end of the press junkets, because when that same person has been asked the same question about, 1,000 times, they physically look almost beaten down. Like they just, the answer is that it's not even, they don't have to think about it anymore. It's just a reaction now. And, what was it like working with John? Oh, it was great, and he's talented, blah, blah, blah. And that's why usually if I'm going to catch an interview with somebody, like for instance, like Quentin Tarantino, he always seems like he's upbeat. But I've noticed, I think he's been more selective recently about all his interviews, because after that, the one interview he had where he sort of got testy with the interviewer, and I think now with when he's doing the Hateful Eight, it's more like he had Christopher Nolan interview him. And then he also had Chris Hardwick of The Nerdist. He had Bret Easton Ellis interview him. And I listened to all three of those interviews I just mentioned, and not one question was the same in any of those interviews.
Right, because these people, they know that there's more to the story than the obvious things. I saw, I think it was Entertainment Tonight or something, when someone was interviewing Meryl Streep about, the role she played in, what's it called, Ricky and the Flash. I didn't actually see it, but there were things, and her daughter in real life played her daughter in the film, and they said, the question was, what was it like to work with your own daughter? And what the fuck is she going to say? It sucks. She's like, it was great. And what did you think when you first did your first scene with her? And she was like trapped. She's trying to put on a smile, and so it's deadly for these actors, directors, writers, fill in the blank, to be cornered with these such trite questions. And but so if you get in there with something original, you're gonna wake them up. Also, what's very important is you get press notes, production notes, which give you all these behind-the-scenes stories. So it's already there. So once you know the questions, like where the origin story, how they come up with something, then you can ask a slightly derivative question. Saying, okay, I know, it's well known that you got this story by reading this novel, but what were something that just disgusted you with the novel that you had to eliminate or that you struggled with? Get the questions that are beyond the obvious ones. And that makes for a good interview, in my opinion.
Andrew, you mentioned, a couple of things in this, and I wanted to tell you a little funny story. And when I was shooting a film about 3 or 4 years ago, we actually had a student journalist. He was a senior at a local college, and he came by the set, and he wanted to interview us all for the college newspaper, and we said sure. And he interviewed everybody. He asked some typical questions, and when we finally got the copy, it was both online, and it was both. We also got the physical version. I don't think he could have done a worse job if he had just made it up. And what I mean by that is he misspelled everyone's name. He got the name of the production wrong. He gave credit to people that he credited other people as the director, other people as the producer. He got everyone all mixed up, and he also basically the whole last paragraph was basically talking about the film that had nothing to do with the film. And I was just looking at this, and I was like, what happened here? and his professor actually called me to ask me about what I thought about the assignment. And I actually asked him first. I said, did he give you my number because this is for his credit? And he said, yes. He, we have to do this, and it's due diligence and this and that. And I told him flat out, I'm kind of torn. I don't want to I know he's a senior in college. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but at the same time, I was like, this whole thing's a mess. And the professor, I heard me out, and he's like, well, I'm very sorry about that. I actually saved a copy for myself just because I now use it as a laughing point, because one guy's name, he actually completely just butchered it. And we had to go back, and we're like, oh, we think this is you. Because his name was Steve, and he called him like Chris Woodward or something. But so we were like, oh, I guess he means you, Steve. So it's just stuff like that. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Andrew. I'm guilty sometimes. Sometimes I mispronounce people's names on here. That's just because I'm an idiot. But other than that, I do my best to get everyone's names right when I finally put this up online.
Yeah, you did great. You do great preparation, which is why I was enthusiastic about doing this interview or this podcast, because I've never done one before. But I clearly your subject is in good hands and you do your homework. To be honest with you, I didn't know where the story was going to go. I thought you were going to be like, he was a wonder kid and he did the best interview ever, and it was in his nature to be a star. But yeah, getting someone's name right, that sort of that kind of goes without saying. That's when you're in the field of reporting, like especially when there are a lot of, like with Alejandro Inarritu, like there's so many accents and tildes and weird little marks, on top of his name that like I just cut and pasted from the press notes to make sure I didn't fuck it up. But you always, that's I'm not sure how much there's to say about that, but yeah, do make sure you get everything right and make sure you run a spell check and make sure you read your stories out loud, because sometimes your eyes will trick you into overlooking mistakes because you know what it's supposed to sound like, but until you read it out loud, you won't catch all your mistakes. But you have to forward me this story. I mean, don't name the name of the journalist, but now you got me curious.
Yeah, I actually forget the name of the journalist, but I promise you, as soon as we're off here, I will find it online and I will forward it to you. It is good for a laugh now that you know the story behind it. And maybe I should link to it in the show notes too.
Say again?
Maybe I should link to it in the show notes as well.
No, well, yeah, that would be interesting. As long as he can put out some kind of redacted document so he doesn't get like humiliated on the internet. Yeah. But no, yeah, I'm curious. Maybe he'll hear this and it'll inspire him to be more thorough moving forward. But
yeah, I mean, it was about 4 years ago, so I'm gonna. I mean, I know he's graduated by now, so maybe he's working for some newspaper somewhere.
Yeah, maybe he's like the editor of the New York Times. Maybe he turned it all around. But we shall see.
Because about pronouncing names right, just as another quick funny story. There's only one person who I've ever interviewed who I was incredibly nervous about interviewing, and that was Cassian Ilves, who is a A-list producer out in Hollywood. He's done, the Dallas Buyers Club. And for some reason, I could not pronounce his last name, which is odd because I have said that last name 10,000 times, and it came to interview him. And I was like, Ilves? He's like, Dave, listen. He's like, it's like pronouncing Elvis. But he's like, just put the W in. He's like, just listen. It's like, it's very simple if you say it right. And I was like, oh my God, this guy is going to hang up on me, and he's going to be like, who is that Dave Bullis kid? I never want to talk to him again. But
that's a cute little hiccup, because it's like you're tongue-tied because you're like geeking out. I get that. It's like, in print when you have the chance to, double check. That's when you can't. Those mistakes are more unforgivable. But yeah, we all butcher our name in pronunciation from time to time. Ain't no big thing. But he was very understanding. Yeah, I mean, I was a little elated, but yeah, I mean, he was a very nice guy and a heck of an episode too. As we talk, Andrew, about interviewing people, you also, you have done such an extensive, portfolio of writing, and I wanted to ask, has your business writing, because I know you've written for CNBC and the financial sector, has that helped a lot when you write for like the creative sector? Because I have a feeling that it actually improves your economy of words. Yeah, well, the short answer is I don't care what you're writing about, whether it's whether it's expository writing, just pure information, or whether it's writing a story, or whether it's an interview. The same elements have to be in place for it to be a success, and that is it has to be concise, it has to be interesting, and that flies across the board no matter what genre you're dealing with. Especially, when you have a chance to edit something before it goes live, you gotta cut out anything that's superfluous. Things like never repeating the same word in a sentence or in a paragraph. Being very careful to look up different synonyms. You make your thesaurus be your best friend so things rhythmically sound right. So yeah, the subject matter may be wildly different, but you always got to just, and there's no real, alchemy to doing it. It just means, sort of giving a damn and really concentrating. But yeah, so that's all writing, no matter what it is. It does have to have a certain, economy of words without too many extra beats, and it should be interesting. And for God's sake, don't use like cliche things like this was an amazing story. There are a million other ways to say amazing, so that's my recommendation is try to use some of the take the road less taken when you can when it comes to choosing your words, because you have the entire vocabulary at your disposal. Why not strive to be interesting in its use?
So when you're writing, Andrew, do you outline first? Like, do you sort of outline whatever you're going to write about, or do you sort of jump right in?
Well, when it comes to that's a really, really good question, because when it comes to interviewing people, and I think that's where people are reading my interviews more than say my business writing. But when you are interviewing people for whether it's an investment person or a screenwriter, be prepared to zig and zag by having that outline, knowing the must-have questions. But when they say something that's interesting and you can sense a more interesting hook that you hadn't thought of, be prepared to go off on that tangent with them. That's when the hook will find you and you didn't even expect it. I struggle to think of a specific example, but if you think you know what they're going to say, and you're usually wrong. If your question's rooted in something that's kind of interesting, usually they'll come up with something anecdotal that you hadn't thought of, and then when you have the follow-up question, that's when you hit the money and hopefully get something that no other reporter has ever asked. But yeah, it's critical to do your homework. I never show up at an interview without formulating, a list of typed up questions. And, sometimes when you're doing these press interviews, especially if you're doing it in person during a press junket, you might get 15 minutes, you might get 10 minutes. So you do have to sort of prioritize and jump around and try to squeeze in as many things as possible. But you're always trying to tell a story. You hopefully a dialogue starts to develop an organic rhythm and conversational, and that they're having a good time. And usually when they are, what happens a lot of times is when you're doing these interviews in person, and let's say it's a 15-minute interview, at the 14th minute, the PR person will sort of walk into the room and put up a finger to signal we have time for one more question. And so to wrap it up and make sure you get the essentials that you wanted. But more often than not, if the subject is having a good time, they'll be like, oh, let him go a couple more. And that happens more often than it doesn't. So I guess I can feel good about that. But preparation is definitely key. Just to have your questions typed out, easy to read, big font, so you're not having to squint and search for them. They're just right there in your face, and you got a highlighter pen and cross them off as you go, and be frosty, be on your toes, and get ready to just jump in and kick into another direction if you're prompted.
Andrew, not to ask a cliched question, but I guess I have to ask it, and that is, what is your favorite interview that you've ever done?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, my favorite interview that I ever did, and this goes back to when I was first starting and I was just taking whatever assignments that were handed out to me. It was for Kill Your Darlings. And the guys that wrote it, it was written by a team of guys, and I forget their names. So that's gonna sound bad, but they wrote it together. They were college friends, and they wrote it together. And then one of them took the directing credit, and we just sat down and just went for about a half an hour, and it was almost like we were rhapsodizing. They were completely. They didn't expect the questions to be so thoughtful, and we did. There was a press conference beforehand where everyone was in the room asking them questions. They were sitting in front of the room at a table, and the questions were those mind-numbing, obvious ones, and they were just spent. But when it was time for my one-on-one, they both perked up, and their answers were clever and informative, and so I think I would say the team of guys who did Kill Your Darlings. And by the way, that's the movie that was a story of Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet. They imagined his college days at Columbia University, just sort of discovering himself and his sexuality, and meeting other beat writers of the day. And Allen Ginsberg was played by Daniel Radcliffe of Harry Potter fame. And so I think that interview is my favorite. My second one would be Nicole Hollis-Center, who wrote and directed Enough Said, with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and James Gandolfini. Why? Because she was hysterical and sardonic and witty and funny, and we had this banter going, and it just made for a very lively discussion. So Kill Your Darlings and Enough Said would be my two favorite interviews.
And I'll make sure to link to those in the show notes as well to everyone listening. But again, that I had to ask that question, Andrew, even though it is very cliched. Because usually, it's like, so what's your favorite color? No. Let me
say this. When I say like the basic trite questions, there's nothing wrong with them. They're good to get sort of like, they're obligatory. You have to ask them, but just don't like make the whole thing be sort of straightforward and unimaginative. Blindside your interview subject with a question that they haven't been asked, because it's so arcane and granular and unexpected. Like I said, you've got your job locked down, or else I wouldn't be talking to you. I'm having a blast for sure, and I can say that having full disclosure that I am slightly nervous to be doing my first podcast, but you've clearly come to the table prepared, so you've already got this locked in for sure.
Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah.
I always try to keep this. I try to keep this just fun and like a positive. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to. I always try to keep the show upbeat as much as possible. Yeah,
and also you're listening to what I say, and then what you're doing, because I do Q&As myself. You're also sort of putting it in context of your own experiences, so it becomes like a dialogue, not a monologue, and it puts the interviewee in a very comfortable place. So, no apologies. You're kicking ass and taking names.
Oh well, I try, Andrew. As we talk about interview skills and your writing skills and everything. One question I wanted to ask you was, about deadlines. And, George R.R. Martin recently missed the deadline for his latest book. And he said, in a blog post, I deadlines, I've never been good with them. And, what I wanted to ask you was about, your own personal experience with deadlines, which is, do you feel that they help, or do you think that they maybe hinder? Just your own personal experiences.
Yeah, I thrive under a deadline because when you do your interview and you're preparing for it and you get it and it's on the tape, then you don't have to worry about scheduling or stressing out about whether I'm going to get good answers or not. You've already got your material. And so then it's just quiet time between you and your keyboard. And that is like a sort of a charmed phase to the process. And you just know when your deadline is going to happen, and you can manage your time accordingly. So I'd like to say I'm allergic to missing a deadline because, when you're in the news field, like that'll get you fired. So, that trained me well. But, when it comes to submitting stories for their consumption online, basically you sort of build a trust with the PR firm, and you ask them, when would you ideally like this to run? Would you like this interview to run, the same day the film opens, or, maybe a week before, to give it some build and some anticipation? Or do you want to wait, 2 weeks after to sort of like maybe get some exposure and give your film some legs after it maybe started to die down after, its opening week? So they'll tell you when it's good for them. And then you sort of reverse engineer it. It's not a daily deadline when you're doing these interviews. There's a little bit of a long wick to the process because, you have to go to a screening, obviously, and you're going to, usually that happens on a studio lot. And you're doing that well ahead of, the film's release. So you go to the screening, you get all your notes going, you study the production notes that the PR team will have given you. Usually it's like a 50 to 60 page PDF where they tell you everything that you know not to repeat because, going back to what we said, those are the obvious things. So think beyond what is contained in the production notes and just use those as a launch point. So you get your questions ready, then you do the press day, either in person or sometimes it's a telephone interview. And so usually you have, you're looking a month out, when to get everything done and get it done well and getting it done on time. So, there's really no good reason to miss a deadline. When it comes out and the PR team is thrilled with it, then they just want to work with you again. So I think respecting a deadline is a given, just like, getting someone's name spelled correctly.
Yeah, I concur, Andrew. I've even if we give ourselves deadlines, I feel that's more of an incentive to get it done. Somebody once told me that goals without deadlines are just dreams.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you let's just say somebody wants to write a screenplay, and if I just say hey, one day I'd like to actually write one. Well, unless you actually make sort of a deadline to actually start, actually building that screenplay, it's just sort of, it's just a wish. It's just a dream. It's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Now you're getting to a whole other, writer's, dilemma, and that's for another podcast. But you're absolutely right. When you're dealing with your own projects, you got to be extra vigilant. And you got to be your own sort of guy who cracks the whip on yourself. But when you're writing for a news outlet, you just gotta be compliant. So for sure.
And speaking of your own projects, Andrew, what projects are you working on now that you can discuss right now?
Well, I'm glad that we're doing this now because, a couple of months ago, I wouldn't have had anything to say except that I'm working on a screenplay. But now I'm actually in pre-production on a musical. It's actually going to be a short film, about 15 minutes long, and it's a story that's based on a play that I saw in Manhattan, I think in 2003, and I just it moved me. It stayed with me for all those years, and now I'm finally doing something with it. It's I don't know if I should give too much away, but it's singing. So there's 4 songs, and I've cast the actors, and we laid down the vocals for the musical tracks, because like any musical, you have to have the songs in place so that the actors can lip sync to their own audio playback. So it's going to be almost like a long music video type thing, and it's an incredible story that about a psychiatrist, and she's treating this patient who's been really destroyed and distraught over a traumatic breakup with his girlfriend, and she's trying to help him master, the loss of his girlfriend. And she puts him under, the psychiatrist puts him under like a light hypnosis to get him to revisit the past with his girlfriend. And then, in doing so, the psychiatrist sort of like falls in love with him and crosses all sorts of professional and ethical boundaries. And so I'll leave it at that. So it's more of a surprise when it comes out as to what she exactly does. But I've got the actors down. The songs are mixed, and we're going to be shooting in about 3 weeks. So deliriously excited. There's just nothing like planning out your own shots and getting props together and scouting locations and casting the actors and all that good stuff. I gotta say, these are songs I can't sing, I can't write a song, I can't play an instrument, but I know good songs when I hear them. So for me to be going into a studio and, with a drummer and the vocalists doing their thing, laying down these tracks, has been a new foray for me, and it's been incredibly fun. So that's what I'm working on right now as we speak.
Oh, that's amazing, Andrew. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Again, like you were just saying, you have the storyboard, and it's really great for a writer when you can finally start seeing all this stuff that it starts coming alive. You know what I mean? You start seeing all this stuff, and you're like, wow, this is actually real. Because as a writer, you spend so much time sort of in the quote unquote cave, writing and revising and editing and everything else, and then finally, when this creation, which didn't exist prior, is finally done, and to see it actually come alive, it's great to see how this process all works. And you know what I mean? And just going through it, and it's just a phenomenal time to be a filmmaker right now. And and it's a phenomenal time to pretty much be in in any facet, whether it's it's TV, the stage, film. So again, congratulations on that. And I know I can hear how ecstatic you are about this project.
It really is, like it wakes you up in a way that's it's like taking it to the next level. Writing something, especially when you've written something that's successful, and I feel like the adaptation of this play into this script, it definitely has a great energy to it. But then when you start to involve other people, and it becomes this like cult of perfection where everyone's into it, it becomes just almost transcendental. And I think a lot of people fantasize about making a film, and you may feel like you're not ready or you don't have the experience, but that's just doubt in your own head. It's just it's indescribable, and I can't wait to yell action again. And so I agree. Thanks for the sentiment.
I know exactly how you feel, and I'm always down to support projects, and I've been there myself, and it's been a gap since I've done anything where I've directed myself, and I know exactly what you mean when you just said I can't wait to yell action again. And again, I wish you the best of luck, with the project, and because we've been talking for roughly about 30-35 minutes now. So in closing, Andrew, is there anything that you wanted to say to sort of put a period at the end of this entire conversation?
I just want to salute you for doing what you do. This was, an unexpected outreach. And suddenly when I went from Creative Screenwriting, which is a wonderful publication, to Scriptmag Magazine, and they have such an incredible, social outreach function, that suddenly people are coming to me, and I've had a lot of opportunities to speak up, and your podcast, it was a no-brainer for me, and this has been just like been part of my journey, and I'm flattered to be that you were my next step and allowed me to have this venue. So that's my final word, is just gratitude. Thank you so much.
Oh, again, it's my pleasure, Andrew. You are more than welcome. And, thank you very much for coming on the show. Again, I've read some of your articles through Scriptmag, and they're phenomenal. And everyone, I will link to that in the show notes, by the way. And speaking of which, Andrew, where can people find you at online?
I just have a website that's pretty much a crude online portfolio. It's just my name. It's andrewjblumenthal.com, and Bloomenthal is Bloomenthal. So that'll have like everything categorized. You can tool around for a minute, procrastinate, and reach out to me if the spirit moves you to do so.
Excellent. And everyone, I will link to Andrew's website in the show notes. And I found out, Andrew, you are on Twitter, but I found you have one tweet. So if you ever need
terrified. I'm so allergic to like that kind of widespread like expression. They made me do it. I don't. It's like I'm trying to get comfortable with it, and because I sort of went to a new venue and they had a big social outreach program, I felt like it was important that I, did my part as well. But I'm confident that now this podcast will be the subject of my second tweet. So, I mean, my theory is that, like, for me, like, I don't know, maybe this is a neurotic kind of thing, but if I only keep it to more milestone events, it'll be taken more seriously, my tweets. So how about that? How about I agree that, the announcement of this podcast, once it's ready, will be tweet number 2.
Oh, well, thank you. I will look forward to that, because I followed you, and I if you ever need any Twitter tips, please let me know, because anyone who listens to this podcast knows Twitter is like my bread and butter.
Don't write a check your bank account cash, because I might call you out on that and like literally like email you with the most mundane questions about tweeting culture, because I gotta embrace it and get over the fear. But
please do.
All right, man.
I was actually approached one time to teach a class online about Twitter, and I said, I said, why me? And they gave me all these reasons. I said, no, thank you. I also was approached to teach a screenwriting course through the same website, and I also said, no, thank you, because I just think there's better people out there. I mean, but Twitter I've pretty locked down. I mean, if you ever need anything, screenwriting, I'm okay. But, and Andrew, I want to say thank you. And everyone listening, you can always find me at davebullis.com, and Twitter, here at Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. And, always feel free to reach out. Andrew or anyone listening, there's a contact form on my website, or shoot me a tweet, or, for those who have my email, just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer. But Andrew, I want to say thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing all your future work.
Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure. Good luck with everything you're doing, and keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you very much. Take care, Andrew.
Okay, man. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.